Hey, everyone out there. If you've ever been confused or frustrated by the process of job searching or internship searching, there's so much that goes into building a resume and a CV and a cover letter, and it can be very confusing and very time consuming. Well, if you've ever gone through this and you're wondering what to do, today's episode is the one for you. My dear friend, Christy Herlick Gibson is a credentialed executive and professional coach, and she's going to share her expertise in career development and job search coaching with us. So in this episode, she's going to lead us through the world of rediscovering your strengths, reframing successes, and relaunching careers. And she's going to tell us what are the tools and what's necessary to find those internships and jobs that you've been searching for, wherever you are in your career. So everybody stick around. This is a great interview. We've got a lot of laughs in here, but a lot of great tools and a lot of great tips from my dear friend, Christy Herlick Gibson. Hey everyone, it's me, Jilla Webb, your host of Walking with Porpoise. Here with my guests to help you develop your foundation of purpose and fine-tune the 4 pillars of success: practice, performance, presence, and peace. Let's get started. Yes, I know, bio coffee, it's interesting.
What is it? I don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's a bunch of health food stuff and wheatgrass and all of that. Just lovely, weird stuff that I drink.
Yeah. You drink that, I'll keep drinking Bill's diesel fuel.
Okay. Which is also awesome. But hey, everybody, I am so happy to be here today with one of my long time BFFs, Christy Herlick Gibson. She is a career and leadership development coach. She works with professionals. I love this, rediscovering, reframing, and relaunching careers. But also, I think those things are necessary at any point. So I'm so excited to talk to you because I think my students are going to get so much out of this interview. So Christy, thank you so much for being here with me.
Yeah, thank you, Jilla. I'm really excited to chat about all things job search and help your students launch their internships and careers.
It's an exciting time for them. I mean, there are so many possibilities and I think so many more avenues to reach these places now, but also it becomes a little more overwhelming to them, I think.
Absolutely. I do tell people that looking for a job or internship is a full-time job. So you have to have a strategy and an approach and kind of work your plan.
What kinds of plans? That's really great. What kinds of things do you tell them? Like, what is a strategy or how long does this take? Can you give us some insights?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say, I know you and I have chatted a little bit already, and, jumping right into doing your resume, your CV, cover letter, I think people want to just do it and get it out there. But one thing that I do suggest, I think, is to start with taking a step back. And that's, in my branding, the rediscover, reframe, relaunch, that's the rediscover phase. And that's really taking some time to reflect on where you've been, what your strengths are, what your expertise is, so that you can really articulate your experiences and your strengths in your resume and your LinkedIn and your CV. Those are your marketing documents. So, for folks our age, we've got a lot of looking back to do. If you're in college, maybe it's thinking back to, what are some things you've always been good at or things that people have always complimented you on? Oh, you're so charismatic. You can talk to anyone, or you're super organized, things like that. I'd almost say take some time to reflect on what some of those traits, strengths, maybe almost what I would call accomplishment stories that you might have, and jot them down and see, what are the themes and how can you tie that into what you want to put in your document. So sounds kind of vague and maybe challenging, but I think it's important because not only do you want your resume, these marketing materials, to talk specifically about work experience or classes, but you also, this is where kind of the personal branding comes in. How do you add kind of the frosting to the cake, or the things that differentiate you?
Right.
And weave those into the way you're describing yourself and your experiences.
So that's sort of the value, your personal, what you would add to a company. Is that what you're trying to get them to get to?
I think so. I mean, I think you want to have, your core competencies, like what are your skills, whether, the type of musician or performer you are, the specific areas of knowledge you have in business, or in your case, in the music industry. Those are the things that when you look at a job description or an internship description, they might have the preferred and the desired experiences or qualifications. But then beyond that, what else is it that you can add to that'll make somebody say, wow, I want to pick up the phone and call this person?
And that leads me to another question. I know a lot of times when they look at these job descriptions and the preferred experience, they think, well, I haven't had that, so they just don't apply. How do they get around not having particular experience? Should they apply anyway?
I'd say apply anyway. I mean, one, if you meet every requirement, then you're probably overqualified.
Right.
Two, nobody meets every requirement because companies have their fantasies there, not the reality.
Right.
So I'd say, if you're 65, 70% aligned with what their required categories are, the requirements, I'd say go ahead and apply. You don't want to disqualify yourself from any opportunity.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. So when they are doing these things, is this and I know you and I were talking about the old school resume objective kind of look at it, but in the new world, these values, this is part of what they would add to that sort of objective, that professional value statement?
Yeah, I think so. Well, one thing, we had talked about this a little bit before we got started, but resumes now really follow a layout structure that's similar to LinkedIn. So if your students are familiar with LinkedIn, there's a headline under your name, and then there's, I don't know what they call it, the bio or summary section where I think you can write up to 2,000 or 3,000 characters about yourself, and then it goes into your work experience. So resumes now are similar, where you've got your name, you've got a headline, then you want to have a short paragraph that introduces yourself, and then you could have a section even where you've got some core competencies listed, which are the skill sets or areas of expertise that you have that you want to highlight.
Okay.
Then you could move into your education. Typically, students will lead with education before work experience.
Right. People
with more experience might lead with their experience because their education is less important 20 years into their career.
Right.
So that paragraph where you're writing about yourself and introducing yourself, I think, from what you and I have chatted about before, the objective that you've had your students write, that's the foundation for what you're going to build out in your LinkedIn profile summary, in your resume introduction or summary area, and also then how you're going to respond to probably the first interview question that you're asked, which is often, so tell me about yourself.
Right.
So I'd say getting really clear about that elevator pitch, that objective, that professional value proposition, which can be quite succinct. And then you have that kind of as the foundation to morph into these other things.
So can you give us an example? Like, what would your professional value proposition, how would yours look?
Oh my gosh. Now you're putting me in the hot seat. Wait, I go look up my
Sorry.
LinkedIn profile. There is a structure for this.
Okay.
I won't, embarrass myself by trying to remember what mine is. But I'd say the structure is really, and I'm going to use blank everywhere that people should fill in the blanks.
Okay.
I am a blank professional with expertise in blank, blank, and blank.
Okay.
Examples of this include blank, blank, and blank. And I'm excited to be here talking with you about X position because of blank, blank, and blank. So the idea there is you want to introduce yourself. You want to lead with what your strengths are, the most interesting things about your experience. But you don't want to just say, I'm organized or I'm efficient. That next set of blank, blank, blanks is really to give a couple of quick examples, right? Why should I believe you that you're organized? Give me a couple of examples.
Okay.
And then the wrap up, I'm excited to be here for blank, blank, and blank is really what I would call the tie-in to the specific company or organization that you're interviewing with. So don't make them make the leap of how that experience translates into what it is they're looking for. You spell it out for them. So, this is where I think starting out with sort of templates for all of these things are important. So I think that's probably where you are with your students right now, having them do these just first draft iterations of their objectives and their resume and CV and cover letters. Basically, you want to create templates for each of these that kind of include everything. And then those are your master documents that you then tweak or adjust for every individual job or internship that you're applying to. You need to customize for each one. So those blank, blank, and blanks might shift depending on whether you're, maybe you're interested in a couple of different paths and you're pursuing all of them. You don't send them all the same cover letter and resume.
Right.
You need to tweak it based on the research you've done about the company and organization. And also, looking at the job description, wanting to make sure you're addressing some of those key things that they have noted in their required qualifications.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that is a short, pitchable, this is who I am and why I'm a good fit for this particular job.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And what about the headline that you talked about? How do you recommend people get their headline?
I think the headline, there are a lot of schools of thought here. One that I've heard that I think is a good strategy, but it can sometimes feel awkward, is to have actually whatever the job title that you're applying for be one of the words in your headline on your resume. And the reason for this, and I'm going to be jumping all over, so much of this is kind of interrelated to other stuff.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I sound like I'm 90.
Well, we're not 25 anymore. That's true.
That is true. We're not 25. We're 25 plus.
Plus, yes.
The plus. When you apply online, companies use what's called an applicant tracking system, or the abbreviation is ATS, applicant tracking system.
Okay.
And so this is where, you go to apply online, you upload your resume, and then all of a sudden they're making you fill out all the same stuff that's already on your resume. That's because they're getting all the data from your resume into their database. And then they've got algorithms or AI, I don't know what, working behind the scenes. And basically they are, after you hit submit, there's not a person looking at your resume for that first level. The first level of, scrutiny through these applicant tracking systems is the database scanning your resume for matching of keywords and phrases from the job description. So, that's where having, if the internship or the job you're applying for is artistic associate, then you want to have one of the titles you're giving yourself in your headline be artistic associate, because that's a ding, ding, ding,
Right,
match
right.
in the ATS. and if they're saying, maybe I'm getting into minutia now, but if you under, let's say, some core competencies that you've listed in your resume or in that paragraph about yourself, if you say that you're a team player, but in their job description it says team-oriented collaborator, change the wording to match what's in the job description.
Very good. So they're like keywords that these algorithms look for.
Right. So that's why the resume format has changed a little bit. So where I'm saying, you have your contact information, and then you've got the headline. So on mine, it might say career and leadership coach, intercultural competency trainer, international student advisor, because I kind of coach and I've got a cross-cultural piece to what I do too.
Right.
I might have those there. But if I'm applying for a job in higher education and the job is called student success coach, I might change the wording and say student success coach, blah, blah, blah. So you want to tweak it to match as much as you can what's in the job description. And then a couple of the words in that intro paragraph about yourself you might want to tweak. And then that next section, which back in the day we never had in resumes. On mine, I've got a section that says core competencies.
Right.
And I've got 3 columns. And this might be where I just put everything in there that from my own reflective work of what I think my skills and traits are that differentiate me and that would be applicable to the types of roles I'm looking for. I might say, organized, efficient, detail-oriented, process improvement, coaching, training, program development. I might have all of those words there, but for each individual job I'm applying for, maybe there's a job where you never have to work as a team. You're doing everything by yourself all the time. I might take all the team stuff out because it's not relevant.
Right.
It's taking up space that might want to use to highlight other things about myself that through my of the company or organization's website, and maybe looking at, the LinkedIn or reading reviews on Glassdoor, I know might be more important to that organization.
Which is another really great piece of all of this is doing your research and being self-motivated enough to look at all of these companies. Like you said at the very beginning, this is a full-time job. Mm-hmm. Finding these companies, finding the buzzwords that they're using, finding the cultural pieces in their company, their company's culture that's important, and being able to reflect that on the document that you will then send them. And that's different, I imagine, wildly different for many companies.
Absolutely. And I could go about 14 different ways with that. So let me think about what I want to say here. Yeah. So, and I feel like so much of this kind of overlaps, right? So This is where, again, I think when people are looking for a job or an internship, they want to do what we call, spray and pray. You make one resume, one cover letter, you send it out to 500 places, and then you just pray that somebody's going to call you. That does not work anymore. You have to be very strategic. And maybe this goes back to the beginning when I said, you kind of have to make a plan and then work the plan. So I think this rediscover phase is really not only looking at yourself and your background to think about how you're going to brand yourself, promote yourself, but it's also getting clear about what are your values, what's important to you, what are you looking for in your, ideal internship or first job or 14th job. What kind of people do you want to work with? What kind of environment do you want to be in?
Right.
All those kinds of things, and really get clear about, what is your ideal workplace? And, when you're 20, you might not have a lot of choice, right?
Right.
But it's good to know what matters to you and what you're working for, or in the long run, what your longer term goal is. But I think getting clear about, what are your must-haves? Like there might be some things that you absolutely have to have in this internship or job. They're kind of non-negotiable versus what are the nice to haves and what are the things that are just, your little fantasy that's probably not going to happen. But wow, that would really, maybe you'll get offered 3 jobs or internships.
Right.
It's usually those, nice to haves or wow, I didn't think this was possible that might help you to make the decision about which offer you want to take.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about you getting clear about yourself and your strengths and how you're going to promote yourself, but then also simultaneously getting clear about the kind of company, the kind of job, the kind of people that you ideally want to work with, and then trying to, that helps you narrow your search, right?
Yeah.
So, because just from what we're talking about, there isn't enough time in the day to apply everywhere, customize your stuff for every place. So,
right.
With your students, and you would know better than I, but maybe there's certain, niches within the music industry that, you could do all of them, but maybe start out focusing on X and Y, not X, Y, and Z, because really Z, the more you think about it and look into it, isn't an ideal fit for ultimately what your goal is.
Right.
What is it you want to get? And especially with internships, what is it? You may not be getting paid at all for an internship. You may be getting paid very little. The value you're going to get is the experience. So what is it that you want to get out of it when you're walking out the door the last day of that internship? What do you want to have accomplished? You need to be thinking about that on the front end.
Right. And I think also location, the non-local career choices are important. And I think location is important in an internship because they have to be able to live. And some of these cities are very expensive to live in.
Right.
But I think long term, wanting to create a job or a life or working for someone where you can be non-local is another interesting choice that wasn't really available in past years. So I think, you're really, for young people thinking exactly like that, like what is it that I want out of my life is a very important thing, I think, to do at the beginning of your search.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be overwhelming too,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's important to keep that big picture or your longer term goals in mind, knowing that it's like going up a staircase, right? It's like one little step at a time. You'll eventually get there. Sometimes you'll slide back down a little bit, or go off on a different staircase. But it all makes sense in the end.
Yes, which one can see clearly when looking at my CV.
A little bit at mine too, but that's the fun of it, right?
Well, it is. And I think, also as looking back now with some being able to look at some history, it all prepared me for where I am today. And I think you must feel the same way. Like if you hadn't had that experience, you would have missed a significant part of becoming the person that you are now.
Absolutely. And sometimes the best experiences are the worst experiences because they make you aware of what you don't want and maybe what aren't areas of strength or interest for you. So there's benefit to all of it.
Well, and I've been trying to talk to them about figuring out what they think their strengths are and what their passions are and what really excites them and, makes them want to get up every morning. And those are the things that I think they should lean into rather than trying to, fill the gaps with weaknesses, with stuff that they absolutely hate doing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly we all have to do things that we don't like and we hate doing every day and in every job. But absolutely, I think that kind of circles back to this front end self-assessment. So, I'll probably repeat myself a little bit here, but really thinking about, what is it that you've always found interesting or that you like to do, that you're good at? What are things that people compliment you about? Like I know for myself, most people who've worked with me, if we were at, a coffee hour or a cocktail party or something, and they were introducing me, they might say, oh, this is Christy. We work together at XYZ. She's the most organized person I know. So that is something that no matter what job, no matter where I am, whether it's my personal or professional life, I'm just an organized person. And yes. I like that. In fact, I can't function if things aren't organized. I'll lose my mind. So, so things like that. So really thinking back to, in high school, were you on student council, or were you on a team, or was there a class that, people you worked on a project with complimented you, or do you find yourself in group work always being the person who does X, Y, or Z? That's very informative. And I'd say, writing out what I would call success stories, like thinking back to something that you're really proud of, and write the story out for yourself. What was happening? What was the action that you took? What was the result? What was the impact on whoever it was you were working with? Those kind of stories, I think, can help with your own self-awareness about what you're good at and what you like, but they also become the foundation for stories that you can tell when you're interviewing. So,
right. Well, I mean, I was going to say that as I think stories that you're good at get asked, what are you good at, and give us an example. And also, what are your weaknesses, and give us an example. So are these stories that you should come up with as well?
I would say, yeah. So thinking about interviewing, a couple things. Let me pause and think. My head is it's not organized at all, actually, right now. My brain is a flutter. So your resume has one job. The resume's job, or your LinkedIn profile, or your CV's job, it's a marketing tool to get someone to pick up the phone and talk to you. At that point, the resume's job is done, and it's now up to you. Right. Through your charm and your answer to these questions, to convince the person you're talking to that you're the best person for the internship or job. So again, I'd say referring back, there's two things that I tell people to do to prepare. One, you need to prepare these success stories that highlight your experience or expertise, that no matter who you're talking to, you're probably going to bring these things up because they are uniquely you. I will always tell a story about being organized. I'll always tell a story about somebody I helped. I'll always tell a story about some kind of cross-cultural difference that I helped to, diffuse or support or something, because that's part of just who I am. So you want to have those stories ready, but then you also want to have stories ready that are specifically aligned with the job description. So this, I tell people, go through the job description, and every one of those bullets of their required and desired qualifications, make those sentences into an interview question. Desired, somebody with 3 years of experience with Excel spreadsheets. Okay, they're probably going to ask you, tell us about your experience with Excel spreadsheets. Or, wanted somebody who has, if it says, marketing and social media skills, right? Tell us about your social media skills. So for every one of those bullet points, assume it's an interview question, and then create what your response would be to those questions and rehearse them ahead of time. So don't, it's almost like, I've never been in a play, but I do tell people, it's almost like you're writing the play, you're memorizing your lines, and then you're the actor in the play. You're all of those things. So
that's great.
The more you can anticipate what you're going to be asked, memorize what your lines are going to be, and then practice them in front of a mirror, or record yourself on your smartphone and play it back and see how many times you say, or, whatever it happens to be, you'll get better in those responses. There is an acronym. Let me see if I can remember it. A lot of the questions that tell us about type of questions are what we call behavioral interview questions.
Mm-hmm.
And those have a very specific format that you can use to follow. It's SMART. So let me see if I can remember. What was the situation?
Okay.
Is the S. The M is any metrics or measurable info you can share. A is the action you took. R is the result. And most people end there. The T is the tie-in. Again, tying it in to the person you're talking to. Don't make them make the mental leap. So,
right.
The situation is what was happening, what was going on, what was the challenge. The metrics are more the measurable. That is providing information about the scope to somebody. Like, were you working with a team of 3 people or a team of 300 people? Did you have a budget of $10? Did you have a budget of $1 million? That kind of information that paints the context.
Right.
The A, the action you took, I did X, Y, or Z. The result is how it turned out. Mm-hmm. And then the tie-in is that piece of, and because I did this, I am confident that I could post your Facebook ads for your concerts in a, timely manner or whatever it happens to be.
Right. And get good return for the actions that I know how to take and do take. That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you. These are amazing points.
Yeah, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place. Somebody listening to this might feel pretty scattered and not believe that I'm the most organized person I know.
I can vouch for that. You are the most organized person I have ever met. So, I want to help clarify a little bit more about the marketing documents, because I know there's lots of confusion. People say, well, I have a resume. Why do I have to have a CV? Can you talk a little bit more in depth about the difference of these instruments?
Sure. I'd say, most people looking for corporate jobs or jobs in organizations, nonprofits, and so on, will just have a resume. And a resume is typically a 1 or 2 page document. If you're at the beginning of your career, probably just keeping things to 1 page is possible. Mm-hmm. And it is this kind of high level overview. It's not every detail and every story, but it's the high level overview of your work experience, of your education, maybe civic involvement, volunteering, whatever you feel is relevant, given the industry and the role that you're looking for. A CV historically has been for people working in academia, in the medical field, in research. It's a much longer document, and it provides more detail on things like, people who've got PhDs do a lot of research and publications. They would all be listed, if you've gotten grants or awards, things like that. So a lot more detail, a lot more depth to it than a resume. I'd say within the music industry and music performance, some of those sections would translate into, performances that you've been in. Maybe you've composed music and you want to share that. In the case of, if you're a student, listing classes that you've taken in music or music industry that would be relevant to what you're looking for. People that you've studied under for, voice lessons or violin and those types of things.
Right.
So I think having that document, the CV, I'd say in the case of your students, is really the master document where you've got everything that you've ever done that's related to what it is that you want to do next and that somebody might be asking you for. It's the massive resource with every field and category. And then depending on what it is you're applying for, you can, do a save as and then kind of cut and paste those sections that are most relevant,
right,
given whatever the organization or company is looking for.
And how do you go about writing a succinct job description. So I worked at X, Y, and Z company, and I performed these tasks. Because sometimes this can be challenging, I think, for young students as well to figure out what's relevant. Like, I'm a people person. Okay, but how did that translate into, like you would say, customer service rather than people person?
Right.
You know, how do
Right.
they drill down and make those business specific changes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say there are two ways that I've seen this done on resumes. And one, I would recommend all of your students go online. Google is your friend. You can search for, I once had somebody who was looking for a job as a dispatcher, people call in like a taxi cab service.
Right.
If anybody knows what taxi is, it's what we had before Uber and
Right.
Lyft. I didn't know what that resume would look like, and I'm a career coach. So I Googled dispatcher resume. You can find tons of samples. So, I'd say look for samples and you'll see there's not one specific template for what a resume should look like.
Right.
But the two ways with these job descriptions for your experience that I've seen is to have, the like in bold, the name of your position, the company, the city, the date range, and then a short paragraph, maybe 2 to 5 or 6 sentences that say what your responsibilities are. And you could just leave it at that. The other format is to be a little shorter with that generic information, and then have that of basically what your high level role or responsibilities were, but then have a couple of bullet points underneath that that give some specific and measurable highlights of things that you achieved. Oh. So I'm trying to think of examples. Like one of my jobs before I became a career coach, I worked in higher education for many years. So I worked at the International House at UC Berkeley. I was the assistant director of programs, and in general, my sentences would be something, describing that I managed cross-cultural and educational programs for 750 residents who lived in a dormitory with international and U.S. graduate students. That kind of gives you a high-level overview.
Right.
Then I might have bulleted points, hired, supervised, and trained 25 coordinators each semester, or new coordinators each semester. So that tells somebody, wow, okay, right. Every semester she's hiring this many people. Managed $500,000 in program funds each year, half of which was grant money or something like that. That's not a very smooth sentence. I'm winging it here. And, just that kind of thing. So it could be, recruited 15 new members for my fraternity, increased advertising sales by 15%, sold 200 tickets for a coffee house concert,
right.
Where you can give specific examples of those successes.
That's great. That makes more sense, and it helps, I think, the person looking at the application or the resume quickly see some real actionable things that you did and the results. Like, it's right there on the page. Right.
And as you say that, it reminds me to tell you and your students, our lovely listeners, that the average time a recruiter spends looking at someone's resume is 7 seconds. 7 seconds. So this can be disheartening when you think, I've spent 14 hours on this document. What do you mean? But this is where, you want to be very focused. You want to have these sections. You want to have the layout such that if somebody is picking up your document and scanning, what is it they're going to see? They're going to see your name. They're going to see that headline. They're going to kind of scan that paragraph about you. If you've got the core competencies, those skills in 3 columns, that's pretty easy to scan quickly. And then if they're looking at your work experience, and let's say you have 3 jobs, they see the title and where you worked, and for, from 2021 to 2022. They see that in bold. They get a sense of where you were and for how long. If you've got a couple bullet points, they can scan that. So I'd say keep that in mind.
Okay. 7 seconds.
And that's also why you want to have that paragraph about yourself at the top, because, also talk about like people reading above the fold, like back in the day when you'd fold a piece of paper into 3 sections and put it in a business envelope. You open it up, what's above the fold? If it's not interesting, they're not going to look any further.
Well, this leads me to another question that I have, and I hear much debate about this. Logo, not logo, color, black and white, something that's easily recognizable and has been branded and thought about. Like, is that a good idea on resumes, or is that like, oh God, it's one of those people and the resume gets tossed immediately?
Yeah, I think that is a good question. And I don't know that I have a specific opinion about it. I think in some ways, some of the facts that I can share are that if you're applying for positions online through company or organization websites that are using the applicant tracking systems, the ATS,
right,
I think you want your resume to be as standard as possible, because it's pulling that content from your resume into the fields of their database behind the scenes, or into the fields that then they make you go through and edit and, submit. So resumes that have groovy formatting and like down the left sidebar, it's color with this and that, that's not going to work very well in the standard database fields in an applicant tracking system. So what I would recommend, I think especially like for your industry, I think having a logo and pizzazz and color, all of that is great. But maybe that is a resume that you keep and looks real pretty. And if you have, and I know a lot of interviews now are on Zoom, but if you have an in-person interview, or if you're at a networking event or a job fair where you're handing your resume to somebody, then have it be that pretty spiffy, colorful logo version.
Right.
But if you're applying online, I would say the plainer, the simpler, the sort of text only kind of version is what's going to work better. If it's something where you're emailing, email your resume to Susie at xyz.com, then I think you're okay to send a PDF of the pretty fancier, well-designed one, because it's not going into that applicant tracking system.
Well, especially if something that you're applying for is, graphic design or social media content designer, having a resume that reflects something that you would do, I think is a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe also that resume or your cover letter should include hyperlinks to a website that you have that is like an online portfolio that people could go look at.
Right. Well, and we talk about this too in classes, because some of the students have audio files. They're applying as sound engineers or producers, and they need to have a specific online place where people can go and listen or see the video content if they are creating music for games or so having those hyperlinks is a great idea to a folder that contains all of your portfolio material. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree.
Any thoughts about, because again, here's something that I hear, don't do. I don't know. I'm confused by this. So I'll just ask the experts here while I have you on the phone. Should you follow up with a resume in person? Should you snail mail that and or a thank you card for the interview, even if you don't get the job?
I think those are all nice touches. I'd say standard practice would be you apply for something, if you have an interview and it's only with a recruiter or the first step, I recommend to people before the end of the day that you've had the interview, send an email. The email will get there immediately. You know they're going to get it. So I'd send a thank you email, thanking for the interview. And, I'd say the structure there really would be, it was such a pleasure to meet you today. Thank you so much for your time. Maybe share something, I learned X, Y, Z, and then maybe tie in, why you think you would be a good fit. That thank you email is also an opportunity if there's something that you forgot to tell them in the interview, which you invariably will because you'll be nervous.
Right.
Or something that they asked you and you feel like, oh gosh, I flubbed up that answer. Or, you get nervous or you forget. You can add that in there.
Right.
Oh, today when you mentioned I wanted to also share with you that I've done X, Y, Z. I mean, I've had interviews myself where, afterwards I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't tell them the biggest project I've ever done in my life.
Right.
I must not have been prepared. So, it's your opportunity almost to fill in the blanks with something that either you forgot or you don't feel great about how you communicated it. And then, kind of closing with, thanks again. And I look forward to next steps. I would absolutely send that the same day. And every step of the way, if you're going through a 2 or 3, 4 stage interview process, try to get the contact information so that you can send that. If you don't have it and you're working with a recruiter, then, ask the recruiter if they can share the email. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. If they can't, then ask if they would pass it along.
Forward. Right. And I also have heard about signatures, adding things, what should be in your email signature for thank yous or just any correspondence. Are there specific things that you want in your email signature every single time?
I think this might be where, and we haven't talked about this a lot, but, going back to what you were saying about the branding and having a logo and that type of thing. If you've created that for yourself, which I think especially in the music industry is probably a cool and appropriate thing to do, have that in your signature line. If you want to design, one thing I would say, your resume and your cover letter should follow the same type of formatting. If you've got business cards or networking cards, your signature line in your email, the way your signature line is in your cover letter that you do, I'd keep that consistent. And maybe that would be a place where you could add a little graphic or something. Like on my email for my business, I have my name, Christy Herlick Gibson, and then I have career and leadership coach, cross-cultural training consultant, something like that. And then I always put my cell phone or my phone number, which happens to be my cell phone, but don't tell anybody. And I used to have a business phone and I got rid of it. It was too much trouble to have too many phones. But so the phone, the email, and then I have my tagline, and I have a website. So I have my website there too. And then I have my little logo my little tagline, which is Rediscover, Reframe, Relaunch. So that's all there. So that's consistent. So if you go to my website, it says Rediscover, Reframe, Relaunch. If you get a copy, if I happen to hand you my business card, it says Rediscover, Reframe, Relaunch. If you read, I think on my LinkedIn, it probably says that. I'd have to double check. But you want there to be consistency. So, I would recommend that.
Okay. Yeah, mine, which now I'll have to check my signature. I know across most of my things out there, it says performer, artist, educator. So that's been my tagline on most of my stuff, but I don't think I have some work to do this afternoon. Okay, I have another question because you've mentioned this, and I am just curious what this is. On your core competencies, you've mentioned you have 3 columns. What are the 3 columns, and what do you put in those?
It's just 3 columns of keywords or action words or skills that you have. So it might be things like, it's one or two words. So it could be, and that's why it can be 3 columns, because it's just, a couple words for each line. But it's things like team player, organized, process-oriented, vocalist, set builder, accounting, whatever. They're not all words that that necessarily match up. Some might be titles, some might be skills, but they're all either like a title or an action or an adjective that describes what you would say are your core abilities, skills, knowledge that are relevant to the type of job that you're seeking. And those are the words that probably are also going to be in the job description that you're responding to.
Okay. So they're not 3 different categories of columns. Okay.
No, it's just, I just think it looks good if it's 3 columns, because it kind of spaces out nicely across the width of a page.
Right.
You have 3 columns there.
Right. No, that's great. And you want maybe 3 to 5 in each column?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That clears that up for me. I'll need to rework that on mine as well. So these are all things about discovering and putting this stuff down on paper, and that is the framing of what you've done and your success in your career. That is the framing this is your presentation of yourself.
Yeah. So I would say, the rediscover is that piece we've talked about, this sort of self-exploration, figuring out what your story is, what your skills are, what makes you unique. And then the next phase, which is the reframe, is then how do you translate that into what it is you want to do next? So that's where then you're taking all the kind of work, the reflection and the writing and exploration that you've done, and you're kind of reframing this description of yourself and crafting your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile, so that they're aligned with that. And then part of that stage is also then writing out that, your value proposition, practicing how you're going to respond to the "so tell me about yourself" interview question. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then all those questions that might come from those required and desired categories in the job description. And then the relaunch part of my methodology is kind of the transition into, the relaunch is a little bit the interviewing and salary negotiation, and then beginning, usually the first 3 to 6 months of a new job. That's also, or internship, usually aren't that long, but that's a transition in and of itself.
Yes, it's a very big transition. So are there things in the interview that you think are important that we haven't covered yet?
Well, the one thing I wanted to say is that, and I say this a lot to my clients, that the piece I said about, when your resume has one job, which is to get someone to pick up the phone and talk to you. Resume, job is done. It's now you interacting with the people who will become your potential colleagues and sharing information and stories about yourself and your experience that result in you getting an offer for the internship or job. And if you want to, I think to think about that strategically, this is where I think really being clear on not only do you have the baseline skills or beyond of what they're looking for the function of the work, whether it's you're going to be marketing a record label, you're going to be the person out doing the contracts, or you're going to be the person coordinating everything for the artists or whatever it happens to be. That's your function. Those are the skills that you need to have. But I think this piece of bringing in your differentiators matters at the interview stage. Because if you think about it, everybody who's coming in for an interview is qualified for the job. They
Right.
probably have a similar background to you, similar education. You're all the same at the point that they're bringing people in for the first interview.
Right.
One of those people is going to be a dud, and they're going to think, why did we bother to talk to this person? Somebody might be overqualified. But then there are going to be 3 or 4 people that truly, in terms of being able to do the job that the company or organization needs, probably all 3 could do it. But do you want all 3 of them to do it?
Right.
Those interviewers are probably thinking, do I want to work with this person? Do they seem trustworthy? Do they seem fun? Do they seem serious? And this is where I think circling back to what we said about doing some research about companies and organizations and types of positions that would be a good fit for you culturally. There are probably some companies that are very serious. They don't want joking around. You got to be by the book. You got to follow the rules.
Right.
There are probably other places that are more spontaneous and fun, and we're joking, and they both need the people with the same functional skills. So I think that's where doing your research, so the types of organizations that are a good fit for you and your style, and then demonstrating that you have those traits that they would probably be looking for,
right,
is important. So are you the person that they want to also work with, that they want to spend 40 hours plus a week being around, relying on, asking to put in the extra work, those types of things. So I think that's where the personal fit comes in. But then also, I think to a point you made earlier, do you have some unique skills or something about you above and beyond that make you more interesting, that give you potential to help with other things that also could differentiate you from the other 2 people who could just as easily do the job, but maybe they wouldn't be as, feel that connection with.
Right. Well, this, I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute, but this is where I think real interpersonal skills and communication is paramount. You must be a good communicator, and you must be able to stand up. I mean, my students all the time are like, why do you make us stand in front of the room and do presentations? Because you need to learn to speak to people and communicate. And we have a saying, as artists, we say, read the room. Right? You have to be able to read the temperature of an interviewer and what they're looking for if you can. Mm-hmm. And some of them are very skilled at not showing you.
Yes.
So little subtle communications in body language, and you need to be on the lookout for those and possibly shift your, the way you're speaking in mid-interview if you notice, this isn't landing.
Right. Absolutely. And I would think, given that, training and that kind of motto that you have, that your students would be more inclined to be really good at that. And I think you're absolutely right. It's super important. I'm not a performer, and as you know, I'm a stage fright person, so I can't, speak on that much further. But I could say that it's so much easier to do that in person now with so many interviews over Zoom.
Right.
There's something lost in translation, and
Very
I think
much.
it's easier if you're on a one-on-one Zoom interview with somebody. You can still kind of at least see their body language from their shoulders up.
Right.
But when you're, I've done some meetings and interviews and presentations where you've got, 4, 5, 6 people. That's harder. Then you've got your little Brady Bunch boxes, or I don't know if you're showing my age there, but, then that's harder, because then you notice, the guy in the upper left corner, he looks like he's taking notes on something else. And the other person, that, I think I wish I had an ideal answer for that. Maybe 5 years from now, when we've all been through this multiple times, we will have, better strategies for these Zoom interviews. But I think you're absolutely right. Trying to find a way to monitor all the people on the Zoom interview and engage them all can be a real challenge.
Well, and, I'm going to circle back into the sort of discovering your strengths, I think it's very important that and we talk about this, my students and I talk about this all the time, figuring out who you are and what your brand is and what your values are, because ultimately you're selling you, and you may not be the right fit for everyone, and you don't want to sell yourself in a way that's going to make you miserable at a company because you sold something that is not truly who you are.
Right.
So I think,
Absolutely.
I always get back to them to say, you have to be grounded in who you are, and that's not going to be the right fit for everyone.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think doing, again, circling back to that first stage, like really being clear, having the self-awareness to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. It's okay. We all have weaknesses, right? And so, having that self-awareness, knowing what you want and don't want, is super important. And
sort of discovering who you are. And knowing your values and and owning it. I guess, here's the other thing too, is that I feel like, especially for you, it's easier. It's been easier for me as I've grown older. I'm more comfortable in my skin. I'm more comfortable accepting these are my strengths and these are not, and I'm okay with that. It's like, I don't have to be great at everything, and I'm okay with that now. I think it's harder as a young person to sometimes not struggle with that as much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
We seasoned people.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I think to your point about even your values, not just your strengths and accomplishments, but what are your values? Because, and I tell this not just to people I'm working with on job search, but in leadership development coaching as well. I think your values are foundational to everything. They become the lens through which you make all of your decisions. So, if you can find exercises online I recommend for your students to clarify what are your values. I think that can be really important. And that can be the connective piece in looking at organizations and determining whether you think you would be a good fit, or you're just, going to feel uncomfortable, maybe even bordering on like, this isn't aligned with what I think is ethical, whatever it happens to be.
Right.
I know there's certain industries I would never, want to work in, and plenty of wonderful people do. Not my thing. I would not feel good about myself.
Right.
So I think getting clear about that is also important.
Do you have any? I know we do a few value exercises in my classes, but do you have any specifically that you like for students and for clients of yours?
Well, I think, the standard thing that I've seen, you're given like a list, like a whole page of 4 columns of all these words. And it's like, okay, whittle these down to the top 15, and then whittle it down to the top, 3 to 5 or something like that. And of course, we all look at it and think like, well, they're all important. Like all 200 of these are important.
Right.
So, I think it's hard. And I would say even when I was younger, it was harder to do than now. But the one little trick that someone once told me, and I thought, oh, this is a really good one. If you're having a hard time whittling down from maybe your first 15 to your top 5, kind of turn it on its head and think about, what are the kinds of things that really anger you, that really piss you off? Because if there are things that really anger or upset you, it's probably because a value of yours is being violated. Oh, wow. So let's say I get really annoyed. Like, this is back to the organization, right? when things are disorganized, when people don't know what they're doing, when there's no plan, I get really frustrated and irritated. So that means that maybe time management or being precise or reliability or something, that's a value that really matters to me. And all of them on the page could matter, but maybe at its core, if we're talking about what are your core values, it's probably those things that tick you off when they're not happening or when somebody violates them.
Oh, that's great advice. I've never heard that, but that's amazing. That's
and then you can give you, like, it could challenge your students, like, spend the weeks noting what pisses you off, right? It's like, oh, maybe that's because you think women should have rights, or, whatever it happens to be.
I think this is going to be an exercise this week in class. Thank you. You've just done my coursework for the week.
Hey, all right.
That's awesome. I've also had some, when people are working with me, they take it then a step farther and then say, list your behaviors. And are your behaviors in line with the values that you say are important to you?
Right. No, that is exactly it. And that is, I will like, let's turn this around to parenting. Okay. Like, my husband and I, and this is for all you students who are parents or someday will be, it's like, I don't even know that I felt like I knew for sure what all my values were until I became a parent. And then I find myself doing stuff or making choices that seemed like, wait a minute, this feels off. And then circling back to, like, whoa, these are our values, but actually we're not living those values right now in this decision that we're making or in this behavior that we've taken on. Course correct. Let's get back aligned with what our values are. So absolutely. I think that's true. And it's kind of, this is jumping into something else, but that I found really enlightening as well. Almost like the things that make you angry, represent your values. And thinking of, this is more aligned with leadership coaching, or even in working on what some of your weaknesses might be, which I would, rather call a development area or a growth area. We all have them. But if you think about, behaviors are what's on the surface. And those behaviors might be the things that are showing up at work or at school or in your personal life as weaknesses or growth areas. But the source of those are most of them unconscious, right? It's our mindsets. It's our values. It's the beliefs we have, some conscious, some unconscious. Maybe some are because we grew up and we just, through our family life that we had, we're learn certain messages that actually may be accurate or inaccurate, true or false. But those beliefs and mindsets and values basically result or lead to the behavior choices that we make.
Yeah.
And then those behavior choices lead to outcomes and results. And those outcomes or results then either reinforce or what's the opposite? We're like defy what the beliefs are.
Right.
So if you're, if you're working on, changing some behaviors or, growth in certain areas that are quote unquote weaknesses, you have to start at, what is the mindset? What is the belief that I have that is causing me to make this choice? The outcome that I'm getting is reinforcing it. So the break needs to be in the behavior, like practicing new behaviors that then will lead to different outcomes that then reinforce different mindsets under the surface.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, those neural pathways we get trenches dug in, and we just do things the same way, and unconsciously sometimes we're just, think, well, why did this happen again?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, absolutely. Yeah.
A
little bit off the topic of the career and job search, but I picture now this loop of like mindset to action or mindset to behavior to outcome, like this little circle. It's like you got to break the pattern somewhere.
Well, I think it comes. Let's use the T and tie it back in. I think it all ties back in because you have to be aware of these things so that you are placing yourself in front of the right people in the right companies in the right culture.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think all of this ties in very nicely, actually. Well,
the thing, I wanted to jump in with one more thing.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk a lot about personal branding. And I think that, personal branding, it's kind of everything we've talked about kind of interconnects to personal branding. But I think a lot of times people, want to keep to, being very focused on the professional stuff in their resume or in their, LinkedIn profile when they're interviewing. But I think especially in the more creative fields that your students are going to be working in, I think that tying in that personality and the pizzazz and the that extra frosting on the cake that makes you unique is probably even more important. And so I think it depends on, everybody's own comfort level. But I think, when you're writing, especially, on LinkedIn or maybe a CV where things can be a little bit longer, don't be afraid to add in personal tidbits that make you more interesting to other people. There's not necessarily always room on a 1-page or 2-page resume, but on LinkedIn, when in your summary, you've got the 3,000 or 2,000 characters, there is that room there. Right. So, and I've seen even people's LinkedIn headlines where they might have, software engineer, programmer, and cat lover, something like that. Just right. Like cat lover. Oh, okay. Wow. Well, this guy's interesting. And he's got a, I don't know, a little icon of a cat on his thing. So, I think things like that make you stand out or make you relatable even. Like if so much of the language is boring business corporate speak, then you don't want it to be so much focused on your functional skills that if your name was taken off and your classmates was put on, nobody would know who's who. Right. So again, tying in that personal flair, that interesting piece that will make you memorable.
Right. Right. All coming back to knowing who you are.
Exactly. That's where it starts. Yeah. And that's the hard work.
Yeah. Very hard. Very hard. That is not easy. Taking a very realistic look at oneself is sometimes enlightening and also very challenging.
Yep, absolutely.
So, well, is there anything else you can think that we've forgotten to mention that would be helpful at this point? Or have we covered most of it?
I think we've covered most of it. I mean, this wasn't really a super linear conversation. We kind of jumped around. I see all these intersecting circles. But yeah, I mean, we talked about the front end of getting clear on who you are and what your strengths are, writing out some of those stories, kind of crafting that into your resume and LinkedIn and your value proposition, then morphing that into how you're going to respond to interviewing questions and so on. I think one thing we didn't talk about that maybe would be a good place to wrap up is adding in that layer of professionalism and making a good first impression. I think, this could be a generational gap too, but I still think, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Right. I think that's the quote. So, and another quote I remember when I was younger is dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So, you don't want, if you've done research and you see that everybody at the office wears, long johns and ratty old t-shirts, you don't want to show up in a tuxedo, but you don't want to interview in the long johns and ratty old t-shirt. You need to, maybe dress one level above what you understand the people there do. You want to look professional. I'd say never wear a t-shirt to a job, even if it's a concert that they produced at that record, whatever it happens to be. But, I think, be professional. And especially, on Zoom, I don't like to see people's beds in the background. I don't want to see weird stuff on the bookshelf that you don't want to have to explain, so make sure that that you're dressed professionally, even if it's a Zoom interview. Make sure that your background is neutral. So, maybe just a blank wall or a curtain but check your background. Make sure there's nothing in it that is going to distract people from focusing on you, or that's going to make them eliminate you because they're offended by something that's behind you that you didn't even know was there.
Right.
I think another thing is, even checking out the lighting. If you've got an overhead light or a window behind you and all the lights coming in, you're washed out. I think also maybe this generation knows this better than I did initially, but, making sure you're looking into the camera on your computer. When you're looking into the camera, you look like you're making eye contact. When you're looking at the person's face, you do not look like you're looking at them anymore.
Right.
So, for as much as possible, look into the camera and then quickly glance down and look at their face and then look back at the camera.
Right.
I think that kind of stuff helps with establishing rapport.
Such a weird thing.
That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that's such a weird thing. Again, the Zoom interview via, as opposed to the live in person when you're just right there in the room with someone. It's quite different.
Right. Yeah. Well, I work online, with my coaching clients. I do all my work over, web-based platforms, Zoom and so on. And one of the tricks that I've done, you see that you can have the window huge and their head is practically the size of your screen.
Right.
But I tend to always minimize it, not down to the size of a postage stamp, but as small as I can, and put that little box right under my camera so that there's not as big a distance between looking at the camera and looking at the person. And if something's going on where I really want to see them or their body language, I might temporarily expand the window out. But, I think developing those little tricks that work for whatever it is you're going to be doing. And obviously that's harder if you're on a Zoom interview with multiple people.
Right.
But if it's one-on-one, I think that can even help just with establishing that rapport and intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. You can also, I often, hide myself. So I'm not staring at myself all the time
That's
on the
a great
screen.
idea. Yeah, because you get distracted.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, wow, that hair, what's that hair doing? It's like, and then, and then, well, how can people, I want to make sure, and of course I will link this in all the show notes, but how do people, if they want your coaching, which has been, and I just have to say, you've helped me, you've worked with me on my stuff, and your help and your advice was invaluable. And, I highly recommend you to everyone out there. So how do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect on LinkedIn. We didn't even talk about the power of LinkedIn. That might be a second podcast.
We'll have to do a whole nother show.
Yeah. On LinkedIn, it's just Christy Herlick Gibson. And my website is ambitionsabroad.com. I'd just say check me out there, or you can email me at christy@ambitionsabroad.com. Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody who wants more information.
That's fantastic. And really take advantage of, her skill and her knowledge and her expertise. Everyone out there, if you're in the middle or thinking about a job search or a job change, or because her advice is spot on. And like I said, your help to me was, I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much for your help that you've given me. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you too. And I'm super excited that your students are going to get some more helpful information, and we'll be eager to hear from you some updates on the great internships and job interviews and opportunities that folks get. So if questions come up as your semester continues, don't hesitate to circle back.
Well, thank you. We may actually invite you into Zoom in a class then. That would be awesome.
Oh, God. Now I'd have to show that I actually know what I'm doing. I don't know about that.
Not a worry in the world, my friend. Not a worry in the world.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I mean, this has just been incredible. So many things that students and anyone out there searching for, new jobs. And this was incredibly informative. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Building your best life and career is about finding balance in everything you do. So build your life on purpose, and you'll find success, happiness, and peace. And remember, whatever stage you're on today, walk with purpose.